Abortion debate, how the cases before the Supreme Court could affect the pro-life movement. Infrastructure update. Democrats on Capitol Hill make another push to get their costly proposals passed. Climate Summit. Hear the message President Joe Biden delivered to other world leaders in Scotland. And special solemnity. Learn more about the significance of All Saints' Day. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 1st, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us today on the Solemnity of All Saints. I'm Tracy Sable. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments today on two challenges to Texas's pro-life heartbeat law, which abortion advocates oppose as a challenge to Roe versus Wade. Today's arguments considered whether abortion providers in Texas or the U.S. Justice Department are legally able to challenge the Texas law, which the High Court has twice allowed to take effect. Let's bring in Carrie Severino now, president at the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, welcome back. Great to see you. So after about 3 hours of arguments today, tell us, what was the result?
Well, I think the results may be different in the two cases the court was addressing today, but it's very hard to predict, particularly because on these cases, we're really talking about these intensely procedural questions. This case is not the one that addresses just the fundamental question of, is Roe versus Wade, our Planned Parenthood case, a good law? This has to do with the procedural intricacies unique to this Texas heartbeat bill. And so it's a little harder to predict. The first case is the original case brought by abortion clinics, Whole Women's Health and others. And there's the question of whether that one can proceed, and then also the Department of Justice case brought by Attorney General Merrick Garland. I think the read is clearer on the second one. That one, the court seemed very concerned about the real stretch that AG Merrick Garland is making in this case, trying to find some way to bootstrap their way into being able to bring a case just because they say this law violates the Constitution. I think they were very skeptical of that. It's possible, however, in the other case, the justices may find a way, maybe by changing slightly some of the procedural questions of who can bring these cases, simply because I think they're so frustrated that this law seems designed to circumvent pre-enforcement judicial review.
And Carrie, was there anything that really stood out to you today from the oral arguments?
Well, it's always great in this sort of new era post-COVID to hear some of Justice Thomas's comments, because he's been really active in oral argument. And he had actually some really serious questions for both sides. So that was wonderful to hear. But again, I think one of the things that really struck me is that the court really recognized what a stretch this politicized Department of Justice had made in this case. And the other thing that really brings home is that if the Supreme Court can't find a way to decisively and clearly answer the outstanding questions about whether Roe and Casey are good law when they hear the Dobbs case in December, this is the kind of case that's just going to be coming back and back and back. And we all know the Supreme Court justices hate to be in the crosshairs on this. They hate to have to make these high-profile third rail kind of decisions. I would say, if you want fewer of these Texas cases coming up, I would really consider having a very clear and decisive guidance to the lower courts in the Dobbs case to make it clear that Roe and Casey are unconstitutional.
Yeah, Carrie, the court, as you know, currently uses viability as a standard for abortions. I want to talk about, how does the United States versus Texas case, how does that challenge the standard? What can you tell us about that?
Well, this one goes not even just to the viability standard, because Texas already prohibits in the more normal course of action just by saying this is against the law and will prosecute you if you do it. They prohibit post-viability abortions. This law was really designed to go beyond that, because the heartbeat, obviously, as we all now know so well from discussing this case, can start as early as 6 weeks. And so this is completely flies in the face of the viability standard. So if the court is ever to get into this case to the merits of it, they would have to squarely say, okay, either Roe and Casey are good law, or and we're going to strike this down. If you're going to uphold a heartbeat bill, you simply have to acknowledge that Roe and Casey have no grounds in the Constitution. That said, because of all of the procedural layers on this case, there's no way they're going to get to that now. Today's argument was really just addressing who can sue. Can anyone sue at this stage to challenge the law? Or do you have to wait for someone to perform an abortion and then someone to bring a lawsuit against them, which is frankly how most constitutional provisions are addressed. And so that was the state of Texas's response. It's just, look, wait, and we'll have a lawsuit that is brought under this law, and then you can squarely address those questions of, again, the state challenging the viability standard head on.
Well, Carrie, unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. So much more we could talk about, but we appreciate your time. Carrie Severino, president at the Judicial Crisis Network. Thank you again. On Capitol Hill, House Democrats are set to try again this week to advance President Joe Biden's two-part economic package. Party infighting has forced the delay on $1.75 trillion economic and climate change bill. Progressives say that they will not back the plan or the bipartisan infrastructure measure until they see the plan in writing. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
Congressional Democrats tell me that they want to have the president's economic plan and the bipartisan infrastructure bill voted on this week together. But right now, negotiations continue on what's in and what's out of the reconciliation bill.
We want to move both bills in tandem. And the second bill, the bill that deals with the needs of the working class of this country in terms of childcare, in terms of pre-K, that deals with the existential threat of climate, that bill is still being worked on.
Senator Bernie Sanders says progressives are closing in on an agreement to modify prescription drug prices. However, some key priorities are still out, like federal paid family and sick leave, free community college, and expanding Medicare to cover dental and vision. But even with the pared-down version, the bill still features funding for child care, universal pre-K, a year-long extension of the child tax credit, and billions to invest in combating climate change.
I'm not willing to go home empty-handed and miss this opportunity to bring the money back to my state and back to the American people to fix the issue. So if that means we do it together, which is optimal for me, or we do it in a 1-2 punch.
Catholic Congressman Rodney Davis tells me he believes in spending money for roads and bridges, but adds the American people are going to pay the price for the Democrats' excessive spending.
It's going to raise taxes and costs on every single American and implement policies that have nothing to do with helping us get through this inflationary crisis, helping us get through our border crisis, and it's very frustrating.
Another issue, Congressman Davis tells me that he and other Republicans, along with Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, will not vote for the reconciliation bill if it does not contain the Hyde Amendment, which is U.S. tax dollars paying for abortions. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In Glasgow, Scotland, President Joe Biden warns that now is the time to act against what he calls a threat to human existence, climate change. But leaders from major polluters like China and Russia were not even at the Global Climate Summit. And some worry the president's policies amount to a cash giveaway that will cripple the country. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, the Biden administration wants the United States to be an entirely clean energy nation by the year 2050, just a few decades from now. But critics point to the staggering costs and often elusive commitments from other countries.
In Scotland, President Joe Biden begins his climate speech asking,
will we act? Will we do what is necessary? Will we seize the enormous opportunity before us? Or will we condemn future generations to suffer?
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says it supports the president's push to protect the planet, writing, the climate crisis is complex and demands the discernment and cooperation of the entire human family. We appreciate the Biden administration's recent commitments in anticipation of COP26 to reduce carbon dioxide and methane emissions. But conservatives at the America First Policy Institute say it's fair to question the sincerity of the Biden administration's involvement with a summit where two of the world's biggest pollution culprits are conspicuously absent, adding, if enacted, these policies will cripple the U.S. economy. Also today, the White House COVID-19 response team said the U.S. will be ready to start vaccinating children between 5 and 11 years old starting next Monday, November 8th. And Press Secretary Jen Psaki announced she caught COVID as the world passes the grim milestone of 5 million deaths from the disease. Also over the weekend, President Biden reflected on his recent meeting with Pope Francis.
I just find my relationship with him one that I personally take great solace in. He is a really, truly, genuine, decent man.
Now, the UN Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, continues tomorrow. In addition to keeping global temperatures from rising, another goal, rich nations giving poor nations $100 billion a year in climate aid. And President Biden returns to Washington on Wednesday. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a report from Rome on a busy weekend for the Holy Father. Plus, Pope Francis tells the faithful an easy way to find holiness. As mentioned, following the G20 Summit in Rome yesterday in Scotland began the annual UN Climate Conference. World leaders are in Glasgow alongside tens of thousands of negotiators, government representatives, businesses, and citizens for 12 days of talks. The Vatican will also be present at the conference with its delegation headed by the Secretary of State. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn joins us now. Colm, great to see you. So what can you tell us about the G20 meeting in Rome over the weekend?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, it was an extremely busy weekend here in Rome as the city was playing host to the G20 meeting, and leaders from all around the world were here in the Eternal City, the first time they've been back together in person since the pandemic began. On the agenda was the talk of global energy, economic recovery, and of course, the big issue of climate change. Now, two big absentees, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. And this is quite significant, Tracy, as China has had some of the highest CO2 emissions in the world. In fact, it was reported earlier this year that their CO2 emissions were higher than all other developed countries combined. And from Moscow, Vladimir Putin sent a video message here to Rome in which he blasted the G20 countries for not accepting and approving the Russian Sputnik COVID-19 vaccine. He said this was because of dishonest competition and urged health ministers from around the globe to reconsider.
Well, Colm, speaking of President Joe Biden, we know that he met with Pope Francis a few days ago, and the Holy Father also met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. Prime Minister Modi was one of three world leaders who took time out of their G20 schedule to meet with Pope Francis, the other being, of course, as you mentioned, the United States President Joe Biden and South Korean President Moon. Now, India's Prime Minister Modi, he came here to Vatican City on Saturday to meet with the Pope. The two leaders, one leading the smallest state in the world, Vatican City, the other the second largest country in the world, India, they met for around an hour and had what was described as a very warm exchange. And according to the office of the Indian Prime Minister, he extended a personal invitation to Pope Francis to visit India. Pope Francis, in return, accepted the invitation. And the last time a pope visited the country was in 1999. That's when Pope John Paul II visited New Delhi. There are about 20 million Roman Catholics in India. That's about 1.5% of the population of 1.3 billion people. Some 80% of India's population, they are Hindu.
And Colm, before I let you go, as we know, the focus for world leaders now turns from that meeting in Italy a little further north in Scotland. We are talking about the COP26 Summit, which has gotten underway. Talk a little bit more about that for us.
Of course, Tracy, that's right. The COP26 Climate Change Summit, it kicked off yesterday in Glasgow, Scotland, and at this there will be around 120 heads of state attending, including President Biden, 25,000 people attending overall. China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin have said that they will not be attending this conference also. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he spoke this morning where he said, quote, "The anger and impatience of the world would be uncontainable unless we make this COP26 in Glasgow the moment that we get real about climate change," end quote. Pope Francis, of course, he was scheduled to attend, but that trip was cancelled, and instead the Pope sent a video message. And in his place, Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin is attending. And yesterday, during his Sunday Angelus address in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis urged people to pray so that the, quote, cry of the earth is heard at the climate conference. The Pope said that he hoped this conference would offer effective answers and, Tracy, give hope for future generations.
All right. Colm Flynn, EWTN News Rome correspondent, reporting for us this evening. Thank you so much, Colm.
Thank you, Tracy.
Pope Francis says holiness is joy, not just effort and renunciation.
Ricordiamoci che non c'è santità senza gioia.
On the Solemnity of All Saints, the Holy Father emphasized that without joy, faith becomes a rigorous and oppressive exercise. The Pope also added holiness is welcoming and putting into practice, with God's help, the prophecy of the Beatitudes, which revolutionizes the world. Yemen has suffered a weekend of deadly attacks blamed on Houthi rebels. More than 27 people died when a car bomb struck near Aden Airport on Saturday. As government officials arrived, 2 separate missile attacks targeted civilians, killing dozens and injuring many more. A Saudi-led coalition supporting the government is funding the Iranian-backed Houthis. A Catholic pastor in Providence, Rhode Island, has been removed from priestly duties following his arrest for alleged possession of child pornography. A statement from Bishop Thomas Tobin calls the charges against James Jackson, quote, a serious crime and a grave sin. Well, today, as we commemorate the first anniversary of the passing of EWTN News President and COO Andrew Walther, our EWTN family is remembering Tom Wenzel, our longtime colleague who passed away on Friday evening. Tom was director of marketing for EWTN, and he joined the network back in 2000. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather, and also a fisherman, as well as a big Cleveland sports fan. And tonight we pray for the repose of Tom's soul and also for the comfort of his family. Tom was 59 years old. Up next, the host of an EWTN show tells us about All Saints' Day. Four martyrs of the Spanish Civil War are now one step closer to sainthood. A beatification mass was celebrated Saturday in Spain for Francisco Castor Sojo Lopez and 3 companions. They died during the Civil War's anti-clerical violence, which claimed nearly 7,000 victims. Some 2,000 are now beatified. 11 are canonized saints. Today marks All Saints' Day, where we recognize and celebrate the holiness of the saints and pray for their intercession. The saints struggled with their humanity and flaws, but ultimately chose to pursue the life and gifts God had bestowed, which makes them great examples for the faithful to follow. And joining me now is Michael O'Neill, host of EWTN's They Might Be Saints. Michael, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
So, Michael, can you give us a little history about All Saints' Day, and when did we start commemorating it?
Well, it's kind of an exciting day for all Catholics because we think about all those people who have gone before us, who might be in heaven, who might be saints, and those people who are recognized in the canon or list of the saints. And so as early as the 4th century, they began to celebrate a specific day for all martyrs. But then in the 9th century, Pope Gregory IV began to set up this date of November 1st in order for the entire church, 9th century going forward, might celebrate those great saints who have lived before us.
And can you talk to us, about how the saints and their intercession can help us in our faith journey?
Well, I think we all struggle with our faith at different times in our lives, and the saints can be both inspirations for us because they made it the whole way. They traversed the entire field, as you might say. But saints aren't perfect. They have flaws like each of us do. So saints are people who sinned like us and who fell down like us, but they're the people who got back up again. And so in my new book, They Might Be Saints, I try to feature these lives of Americans, 24 venerables and blesseds, who live normal lives like the rest of us, but they live lives of virtue as well. And they got back up after they fell down.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, you're the host of EWTN's They Might Be Saints, and you also have written a book of the same name. I'm curious, what was your inspiration and what saints inspire you? Is there a particular saint or saints that maybe you have a devotion to?
Well, in this book, I feature every saint who's a venerable or a blessed, a future saint from America. So those are people born in the United States or live the majority of their lives in the United States. So they're on the path to sainthood. And when I look at people who inspire me, I look at people like Father Michael McGivney, who founded the Knights of Columbus, or Patrick Peyton, whose great Marian devotion was spread around the world. But then we can focus on people like Blessed Miriam Teresa Demjanovic, a sister from New Jersey who had the idea of the universal call of holiness, that we're all called to be saints. Or Bishop Frederick Barriga, a venerable from Upper Peninsula, Michigan, who put on snowshoes and walked thousands of miles to spread the gospel and bring the sacraments to the native people and copper miners in Michigan. So these are all people who inspire me in my own life of faith.
Can you talk about your book and also the show, too? I'm wondering, what you personally have learned from the production of the show and also writing the book.
So the program, which airs on EWTN at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays, is a show about Americans on the path to sainthood and the search for canonization miracles. We've done 12 episodes so far, and these are interviews with historians, postulators, bishops, family members of these people who live these amazing lives. And then with recreations, we bring them back to life. And we also show the search for miracles because that's so important with each canonization cause. We've done 12 episodes, 15 episodes have been filmed already. So it's been a great thing to be a part of. And the book just dovetails perfectly with that. So if for people who watch the show and they want to learn more about one of those future saints, they can pick up the book and they can learn the entire life, so to speak, of that saint. So I've got 24 of them. And hopefully someday we'll do an episode of They Might Be Saints on television about each and every one of these future saints as well.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Not a whole lot of time left, Michael, but wondering anything else that you'd like to share with us before we let you go.
Well, I think that each and every one of these saints is important. We might want to know about how the canonization process works or how miracles are found, and that's all in the book. But for each and every one of these saints, we see 24 Americans on the path to sainthood. And it's kind of inspiring to know that there were people who walked on American soil who lived amongst us and are holy people on their way to be recognized as saints. So hopefully this book brings inspiration to some people.
Oh, absolutely. Michael, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And finally, tonight, a new museum in Russia is filled with Christian images, including Christ and the Blessed Virgin. The Museum of Christian Culture in St. Petersburg houses sacred items, including church texts and religious paintings and icons dating from the 17th century. The two-story museum features exhibits on the Old Testament and the prophets and the New Testament and Gospels. Visitors say the museum is filled with a sense of tradition and peace. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We leave you with more from the Museum of Christian Culture in St. Petersburg. Good night and God bless.